She waited by the fence for 5 years, the cowboy who finally told her the truth. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rolling hills of the small Texas town, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. A gentle breeze rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and dry earth. Clara walked slowly along the dirt path that led to the old wooden fence by the river, her fingers brushing lightly against the weathered wood. She loved coming here, not just because it was quiet, but because it was the place where life felt simpler, where every worry seemed to melt away in the warmth of the late afternoon sun. Clara was 20 years old, with a curious spirit and an open heart that often led her to notice things others might miss. She had lived in the town all her life, but it wasn't until that summer she met Ethan that her world seemed to expand beyond the familiar streets and familiar faces. Ethan was a cowboy, tall and strong, with eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and mystery. He didn't say much at first, but when he did speak, his voice carried a calm confidence that drew people in. Their first meeting was almost accidental. Clara had been sitting on the fence, her sketchbook in hand, trying to capture the rippling water of the river below. She liked to draw, and the fence had become her favorite spot for inspiration. That afternoon, she had been lost in her sketches, so focused on the curves of the river and the shadows of the trees that she didn't notice Ethan approaching until his shadow fell across her paper. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. Clara looked up, startled, and then smiled. "No, go ahead," she said, scooting over slightly. Ethan sat beside her, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The river flowed quietly below, and the sun bathed them in a golden light. Clara noticed the way his hat shaded his eyes and the small scar above his left eyebrow, which somehow made him look even more rugged. "You draw well," Ethan said finally, glancing at her sketchbook. "You've captured the river exactly." Clara felt a flush of pride. "Thank you, I come here a lot, it's peaceful," he nodded, watching the water. "I know the feeling, there's something about this place, it makes everything else fade away." They sat together for what felt like hours, talking about small things at first, the weather, the town, the river. But soon their conversation deepened, and Clara found herself opening up in ways she rarely did. She told him about her dreams of traveling beyond Texas, of seeing mountains and oceans, of drawing landscapes that stretched far beyond her little town. Ethan listened, really listened, and for the first time Clara felt that someone understood her, that someone shared her sense of wonder. Ethan, too, shared pieces of his life. He spoke of the ranch he helped run, of long days in the sun, of horses he had grown up with and cattle he had learned to care for. He told her about the pride he felt in his work and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a day's hard labor pay off. Clara was fascinated. She had always admired the countryside, but hearing Ethan describe it with such love and dedication made her see it through new eyes. Days passed, and they met at the fence almost every evening. Sometimes they would just sit in silence, watching the sun sink lower and the river shimmer in its fading light. Other times they talked and laughed, sharing stories and secrets. Clara felt her heart grow lighter with each visit, and though she tried not to admit it to herself, she knew she was beginning to fall for him. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of violet, Ethan leaned on the fence, looking out over the river. "Clara," he said softly, "I'm going to have to leave soon. My family, they need me back at the ranch." Clara felt a pang of disappointment. "Leave when?" "Soon," he replied, his jaw tightening slightly. "I wish I didn't have to. I've enjoyed our time together more than I can say." Clara bit her lip, trying to keep her voice steady. "I understand. Family comes first." Ethan turned to her, his eyes serious. "I don't want you to wait for me. Life is too short. You should go and do the things you've dreamed about. Don't waste your time sitting here thinking I'll come back." Clara looked down at her hands, twisting a loose thread on her skirt. I don't know if I can help it," she admitted quietly. "This place, it feels right. I've never felt right anywhere else." Ethan's face softened, and he reached out to gently touch her shoulder. "Clara, you're special. You deserve to be happy, and I hope you find that happiness wherever it leads you." She nodded, her heart heavy. "Promise me you'll write." He smiled faintly. "I promise." And with that, he rode away the next morning, leaving Clara by the fence, staring at the horizon where he had disappeared. The air seemed quieter, the river more still, as if the world itself had paused to mark his departure. She sat there long after the sun had risen, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and hope. In the days that followed, Clara returned to the fence, sketchbook in hand, capturing the changing seasons, the play of light on the water, and the wildflowers that grew along the edges. She held on to the hope that Ethan would return, remembering his promise to write, and the warmth of his smile that had made those evenings unforgettable. Life in the town continued, with its routines and familiar rhythms, but Clara's heart was tied to the fence and to the memory of the cowboy who had captured her imagination and her heart. Each evening, she would walk the dirt path to the river, climb onto the fence, and wait. Sometimes she imagined seeing him riding toward her, the wind catching his hat, his eyes locking with hers. Other times, she imagined his letters arriving, filled with stories of the ranch and apologies for the delay. The townsfolk whispered about her, some offering gentle advice, others less kind. "You should move on," they said. "It's been too long." But Clara didn't hear them. She couldn't. Her heart had made a quiet decision long ago, a decision to hope, to wait, and to believe in the promise of someone who had changed her world in a single summer. As the weeks turned into months, Clara learned patience in ways she had never known. She learned to cherish the small joys, the rustle of the river, the dance of sunlight on the water, the way the wildflowers leaned toward the sun. She learned that waiting wasn't just about someone else. It was about discovering strength and resilience within herself. And so, with each passing day, Clara remained by the fence, her eyes scanning the horizon, her heart holding on to a hope that refused to fade. She didn't know if Ethan would ever return, but she knew that the moments they had shared, the laughter and the conversations, had planted something deep within her, a seed of belief in love, in trust, and in the extraordinary power of patience. The summer ended, and then the seasons shifted. Autumn brought crisp air and golden leaves, which Clara would sketch with delicate strokes in her notebook. Winter followed, with frost-kissed mornings and quiet nights by the fire. But still, she made her way to the fence whenever she could, even if only to touch the old wood and remember the promises made. Spring arrived again with its new blooms and fresh scents, and Clara's hope bloomed anew with it. Through it all, she remained steadfast, a silent witness to the passage of time, her loyalty unwavering, her heart quietly courageous. And though the future was uncertain, and though the world had its ways of testing patience, Clara's faith in the promise made that summer by the river never faltered. She had met Ethan once, and that meeting had changed the course of her life. And so she waited, with hope as her companion and the fence as her anchor, believing in the love that had arrived unexpectedly, and in the possibility that one day it might return. The seasons passed slowly, each one leaving its mark on the landscape and on Clara. The small Texas town she had always known continued its quiet rhythm of life. Shopkeepers opened their stores each morning, children ran along the dusty roads, and the river wound its way past the hills, as steady and unchanging as ever. But for Clara, the days were measured not by the changing seasons or the passing of time, but by the hours she spent at the fence, watching, waiting, and hoping. Every morning she would rise with the sun, her hair catching the soft light as she tied it back in a loose braid. She dressed simply, in faded skirts and well-worn shoes, the kind of clothes that made it easy to wander along the fields and tend to the small garden she had planted near the riverbank. The wildflowers she had nurtured over the past summer had grown taller now, their petals catching the breeze like small bursts of color against the golden grass. Clara had even begun keeping a journal, filling it with sketches of the flowers, notes about the animals she saw, and occasional thoughts about the cowboy who had changed her world. Though she had not received any letters from Ethan, she did not lose hope. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she imagined hearing the faint sound of hooves approaching, or glimpsed a rider on the horizon, only to have it vanish as she blinked. Each time her heart leapt, and each time she forced herself to stay calm, reminding herself that patience was a virtue she had promised to embrace. The townsfolk began to notice her persistence. Some offered kind words, admiring her loyalty. Others whispered that she was clinging to a memory, that she should move on. Clara heard their words, but she did not listen. Their voices were background noise, unable to shake the conviction she had in the promise Ethan had made. As the first autumn arrived, the wind turned crisp and carried the scent of fallen leaves. The river reflected the deep reds and oranges of the surrounding trees, and Clara's sketches became more vibrant, capturing the fiery colors of the season. Some days she would sit on the fence for hours, notebook in hand, drawing the way the light played across the water or the way a bird landed on a branch and tilted its head curiously at her. Her heart was heavy at times, and her thoughts would drift to Ethan, imagining what he was doing, how the ranch might be keeping him busy, and whether he ever thought of her. The people in the town began to change her waiting into stories they told each other. "There's Clara," they would say, "still waiting by the river, still hoping." Some of the younger children admired her dedication, often running to the fence to wave or leave a small flower at the post for her. Clara smiled at these gestures, seeing in them a reminder that love and loyalty could inspire even those who had yet to understand it. The older townsfolk, however, sometimes shook their heads, warning her not to let her heart grow too heavy with longing. But Clara had learned a quiet strength during these months. The waiting, though difficult, had taught her patience, resilience, and the value of holding on to something meaningful. Winter came, bringing with it early frosts and long nights. The river froze along the edges, creating delicate patterns of ice that sparkled like crystals in the pale morning light. Clara would bundle herself in scarves and thick coats, her fingers red from the cold, and still she would make her way to the fence. She learned to find beauty in the stillness of winter, the quiet that the season brought. Sitting on the fence as snow fell gently around her, she would close her eyes and imagine Ethan's voice, the way he had spoken that summer, the way his presence had felt both comforting and exciting. Even though he was gone, even though the distance between them had grown with each passing day, she felt connected to him in a way that was almost unexplainable. Some evenings, she would pause on the path to the river to help travelers or neighbors who were passing by. She would offer a warm smile, a word of encouragement, or a helping hand. Clara found that giving to others brought her a sense of fulfillment she had not anticipated. Waiting had not made her bitter or lonely, it had made her compassionate and understanding. She learned to see the little miracles in life, a deer crossing the field at dusk, the first crocus pushing through winter snow, the way a friend's laughter could brighten even the darkest day. Spring eventually returned, bringing with it the promise of renewal. The wildflowers along the riverbank burst into bloom, their colors brighter than ever, as if they had been waiting all winter for the warmth of the sun. Clara's sketches reflected the beauty and hope of the season. She often sat for hours, capturing the delicate petals and the way sunlight danced on the water, feeling a sense of peace even as her heart continued to ache for the cowboy who had once sat beside her. She told herself that every day she waited was a day of strength, a testament to the love she had for someone who had left too soon. Despite the passage of years, Clara never grew weary of her routine. She had made the fence a part of herself, a symbol of faith, loyalty, and hope. Each day, she would climb onto it, look out over the river, and imagine the life she and Ethan could have shared. She imagined long rides on horseback, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and the joy of simple moments shared together. These visions filled her with both longing and determination. She refused to give up, refused to let doubt take root in her heart. Clara's friends occasionally tried to intervene, gently urging her to move on, to open her heart to someone else. "You deserve happiness," they would say. "You can't live your whole life waiting." But Clara had learned to understand the difference between patience and obsession. Her waiting was not a cage, it was a choice, a quiet declaration of hope. She had built a life around this hope, learning to care for the land, for the flowers, and for the small joys that life offered. Waiting had become a form of living, not a limitation. As the years went by, Clara also began to see the fence as a guardian of memories. Each scratch on the wood, each knot and crack, told a story. It reminded her of the first time Ethan had sat beside her, of the warmth of his presence, and of the promise he had made. She would sometimes trace her fingers over the grain of the wood, remembering the feel of his hand brushing against hers. The fence, once just a simple boundary, had become a bridge between past and present, between longing and hope. One particularly bright summer morning, Clara noticed a small group of children playing near the river. They laughed and shouted, tossing sticks into the water and chasing each other along the grassy bank. Clara smiled, thinking of how she used to be so carefree at their age. She walked over to watch them for a moment, enjoying their energy and joy. A small boy spotted her and waved eagerly, holding out a wildflower he had picked. Clara accepted it with gratitude, tucking it carefully into her notebook. The gesture reminded her that even as she waited, life continued, full of moments that could be cherished and celebrated. Clara also found comfort in writing letters to Ethan, even though she had no address to send them to. She wrote about her days, the sketches she had completed, the animals she had seen, and the small joys and challenges she faced. These letters became her companions, a way to speak her heart and keep her connection to him alive. Sometimes she would read them aloud to the river, imagining that the water would carry her words to him across the distance. Though she did not know if he would ever receive them, the act of writing brought her solace and a sense of continuity. Despite the passing years, Clara's hope never faltered. Each evening, she would make her way to the fence, climbing up to her favorite spot and looking out over the horizon. The sunsets remained breathtaking, casting their golden glow across the river and hills. Clara would watch the light change, feeling a quiet sense of peace and anticipation. She knew that waiting was not easy, but she also knew that it had given her strength she might never have discovered otherwise. She had learned that love was not always about possession or immediacy. Sometimes it was about patience, faith, and the willingness to trust in something greater than oneself. As the 5th year approached, Clara had become a fixture of the town. People who passed by the river would nod in acknowledgement, some stopping to share a few words, others simply tipping their hats in respect. She had earned a quiet admiration, not just for her loyalty, but for the dignity and grace with which she carried herself. Clara had transformed waiting into a life of meaning, filling her days with beauty, kindness, and purpose. And yet, despite all the sketches, letters, and moments of quiet reflection, her heart still longed for the cowboy who had once promised he would return. The river, the fence, and the horizon remained her companions, steadfast and patient, just as she had been. Every evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with colors that seemed almost magical, Clara would sit on the fence, her eyes scanning the distance. She did not know when or if Ethan would return, but she knew that she would be ready when he did. Her hope was not blind. It was rooted in the memory of a summer that had changed everything, in the warmth of a presence that had left an indelible mark, and in the belief that some promises were meant to be kept, no matter how long it took. 5 long years had passed since Ethan had ridden away from the small Texas town, leaving Clara standing by the fence, her heart full of hope and longing. During that time, she had grown stronger, more patient, and more resilient than she had ever imagined possible. The river had become her companion, the fence her anchor, and the horizon a promise that someday, somehow, the cowboy she loved might return. She had sketched hundreds of sunsets, written countless letters that never left her hands, and tended the wildflowers that grew along the fence, each bloom a symbol of her enduring hope. One late summer evening, the sky stretched wide and golden over the plains, and Clara was at the fence as usual. The air smelled of freshly cut hay and warm earth, and a gentle breeze carried the soft rustle of leaves from the nearby trees. She sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, gazing at the river where sunlight danced on the rippling water. The world seemed calm and still, the kind of peaceful evening that made her heart ache with longing. Suddenly, in the distance, a flash of movement caught her eye. Her heart skipped a beat. At first, she thought it was a horse passing by, perhaps a local farmer returning from the fields. But as the figure drew closer, her chest tightened with a mixture of disbelief and hope. The rider's gait was familiar, his posture unmistakable, and the way the sun glinted off his hat sent a shiver down her spine. It was him, Ethan. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She blinked several times, hoping her eyes were not deceiving her. But the figure grew nearer, and the truth became undeniable. Ethan was riding toward her, his boots steady in the stirrups, his horse moving with purpose across the open field. The world seemed to hold its breath as he approached, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of the plains, the faint sound of hooves beating against the earth, and the unmistakable feeling that a long-awaited moment had finally arrived. Clara stood slowly, her legs trembling slightly, and climbed onto the fence, as she had done so many times before. Her heart pounded fiercely, a mix of joy, nervousness, and cautious hope. She remembered the summer they had first met, the laughter they had shared, and the promise he had made before leaving. Would he remember her? Would he still care? The years had tested her patience, and now, finally, the test was coming to an end. Ethan dismounted, his boots crunching on the dry dirt. He removed his hat, revealing his face to her in the warm glow of the setting sun. Time had changed him. His features were slightly more weathered, the sun, and work on the ranch, leaving a faint tan and subtle lines around his eyes and mouth. His hands were calloused, his clothes worn, yet there was a familiar strength and quiet confidence in the way he stood. And then he looked at her, and in that moment all doubts and years of waiting melted away. "Clara," he said, his voice steady but soft, carrying a mix of relief and hesitation. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. For a moment they simply looked at each other. 5 years of absence, of longing, of hope and doubt seemed to compress into that single instant. Ethan took a step closer, and Clara felt her heart leap. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing him again, the warmth of his presence, and the intensity of the emotions it stirred within her. Ethan began, then paused, searching for the right words. His eyes softened as he looked at her, and Clara sensed the weight of the years he had carried. "I should have come sooner, I should have written, I'm sorry." Clara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. 5 years, Ethan, 5 years I waited, why didn't you come back?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, and motioned for her to sit on the fence again. She hesitated, then did as he asked, her heart pounding with anticipation. Ethan settled on the fence beside her, leaving a careful space between them. "There was a tragedy at the ranch," he began, his voice low. "My father fell seriously ill, and I had to take care of him. The ranch needed every bit of my attention. We faced storms, financial struggles, and responsibilities I couldn't ignore. I thought I could come back sooner, but life kept getting in the way." Clara listened intently, her hands clutching the fence post. She felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief because he had not forgotten her, because he had not abandoned her by choice. Frustration because those years had been filled with longing, hope, and uncertainty. "I wrote letters," Ethan continued, his voice tinged with regret. "I tried to send them, but they never reached you. Every time I thought I could leave the ranch for even a short visit, something would happen. Sickness, storms, emergencies. I wanted to come to you, Clara, more than anything. You were never far from my thoughts." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out, placing her hand over his. The warmth of his touch brought a sense of peace she had not felt in years. "I believed in you," she said softly. "Even when everyone told me to forget, even when it felt like the world had moved on without you, I held on to the hope that you'd return." Ethan's eyes glistened with emotion. "You've been incredible, Clara, strong, patient, and loyal. I can't express how much that means to me. I've missed so much. Every day I was away, I thought of you, wondered if you were still there, still waiting." For a long moment they sat in silence, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the field. The river flowed quietly beside them, as if acknowledging the end of a long wait. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the gentle rustling of leaves filled the space between their words. Clara felt the years of longing, worry, and hope converge in a single, powerful wave of emotion. "Clara," Ethan said finally, turning to face her fully, "I know I can't make up for the years I was gone, but I am here now. I want to be with you if you'll have me. I want to build the life we dreamed about that summer and all the summers that came after. Will you let me try?" Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of love and relief. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the truth in his words, and the genuine regret for the time lost. Slowly she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, Ethan, I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer if it means being with you now." Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and warmed her entire being. He gently took her hand, lifting it to his lips and pressing a soft kiss against her knuckles. The gesture was tender, reverent, and filled with promise. In that moment, Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known, as if the years of waiting had led her precisely to this moment. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of the years apart, the struggles and triumphs, the small victories and quiet disappointments. Ethan spoke of the ranch, of the storms and hard work, of lessons learned and responsibilities shouldered. Clara shared her own journey, the sketches, the letters, the wildflowers, and the strength she had discovered in herself. With each word, each glance, the distance of 5 years seemed to shrink, replaced by a sense of closeness, understanding, and renewed connection. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in deep shades of purple and gold, Clara and Ethan remained at the fence, hand in hand. The river reflected the colors above, and the wildflowers swayed gently in the evening breeze. For the first time in years, Clara felt the weight of waiting lift from her shoulders. The promise of the past had become the reality of the present, and the future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Clara, I don't want to waste another moment. Let's start again, truly start. I want to be a part of your life every day, and I want you to be a part of mine. No more delays, no more distance." Clara's eyes glistened with tears of joy. "I want that too, Ethan. I never stopped wanting it. I never stopped believing." They sat together on the fence as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, a quiet symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. 5 years of waiting, uncertainty, and longing had finally led to this moment of truth. And as Clara rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, she knew that the fence, the river, and the horizon would always remind her of the strength it had taken to wait, and the joy that came when the truth finally arrived. The sun rose slowly over the small Texas town, spilling gold across the rolling plains and the river where Clara had waited for 5 long years. The air was fresh and filled with the smell of earth and wildflowers, a gentle reminder that life moved forward, even after long periods of waiting. Clara stepped outside her little home, her heart light and her mind calm. She no longer felt the heavy weight of uncertainty or longing that had pressed on her all those years. Instead, there was a quiet joy in knowing that Ethan was finally here, and that together, they could begin the life they had imagined so long ago. She walked down the familiar dirt path toward the fence, the wooden posts looking the same, yet somehow different now. The fence had been a symbol of waiting, patience, and hope, but today it symbolized a reunion, a promise kept, and the beginning of a shared future. Ethan was already there, leaning casually against the wood, a soft smile on his face. The sight of him made Clara's heart swell, and she quickened her pace, the excitement of their new life together brightening her every step. "Good morning," Ethan called out, tipping his hat. "Good morning," Clara replied, her voice warm, her eyes shining. They met at the fence, and Ethan took her hand in his. The touch was familiar and comforting, yet it held a new promise, one of partnership, trust, and love that had endured both time and distance. For a moment, they simply stood together, listening to the river flowing nearby, feeling the breeze against their skin, and letting the quiet morning wrap around them like a soft blanket. "Can you believe it's finally over?" Clara asked softly, a small laugh escaping her lips. 5 years of waiting, and now it's really here." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady and tender. "It's been a long road, Clara, but every day I thought of you, every single day I hoped you were still waiting. I hoped that you hadn't given up on me." "I never gave up," Clara admitted. "Even when it hurt, even when I wanted to, I couldn't. This fence, this river, everything, it reminded me of the promise you made. And now that you're here, I feel like all the years of waiting were worth it." Ethan pulled her closer, and she rested her head against his chest. For the first time in years, Clara felt the weight of those 5 long summers, winters, and springs lift from her shoulders. She had endured the longing, the uncertainty, and the quiet loneliness, and now all that patience had blossomed into a joy so full it made her heart ache in the best possible way. They spent the morning walking along the riverbank, talking about the years they had spent apart. Ethan told Clara stories of the ranch, how he had struggled to manage it after his father's illness, how he had faced storms and financial pressures, and how he had dreamed constantly of returning to her. Clara listened, absorbing every word, feeling the truth of his experiences and the sincerity of his regrets. "I never forgot you," Ethan said finally, his voice low and sincere. "Not for one single day, and now I want to make every moment count, starting today." Clara smiled, a warm, bright smile that reached her eyes. "Then let's start today, Ethan. Let's build our life together from here, no more waiting, no more delays." The rest of the day was spent in simple joys. They repaired parts of the fence together, laughing as the wood splintered slightly under their hands. They picked wildflowers along the river, weaving them into small bouquets to place in Clara's home. They watched the clouds drift lazily across the sky, sharing small stories, gentle touches, and quiet laughter that seemed to echo across the plains. For Clara, every moment was precious, a culmination of years of longing and hope now transformed into the warmth of presence and connection. As the weeks passed, life began to settle into a comfortable rhythm for the two of them. Clara returned to her sketches, now capturing not only the beauty of the river and wildflowers, but also the quiet joy of daily life with Ethan. She drew their mornings together, the way sunlight caught his hair, the way he laughed when something surprised him, and the peaceful expressions he wore as they worked side by side. Each sketch became a record of the love that had survived years of absence, growing stronger through endurance and faith. Ethan, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. The ranch remained important, but now it was shared work, with Clara supporting him and helping him see that life was not only about toil and responsibility. It was also about love, connection, and the small moments that made every day meaningful. Together they repaired old fences, tended fields, and cared for animals, their laughter often carrying across the plains. Life was not always easy, but the difference now was that they faced it together, side by side, no longer separated by distance or uncertainty. The townsfolk began to notice the change. Clara, once known simply as the girl who waited by the fence, was now a partner in life and work with Ethan. People admired their dedication, both to each other and to the land. Children would often stop by to greet them, curious about the stories of love and patience that had made Clara a figure of quiet inspiration. Even the older residents, who had once worried that Clara's loyalty might be misplaced, now smiled knowingly, recognizing that love, when true, could endure and flourish even against the challenges of time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara and Ethan sat on the fence once again, just as they had on that first day years ago. But this time, it was not a place of waiting. It was a place of connection, of reflection, and of promise for the future. The river sparkled in the fading light, the wildflowers swayed gently, and the sky glowed in soft shades of orange and pink. "I've never felt so happy," Clara said, leaning against Ethan's shoulder. "It's like all the waiting, all the years, they were just preparing me for this moment." Ethan kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "I feel the same way. I wish I could take back the years we lost, but I know that now we can make up for them in ways that matter. We have a future together, Clara, one full of love, laughter, and hope." They talked late into the night, sharing dreams and plans for the future. They imagined a home filled with warmth, laughter, and light. They spoke of traveling, seeing new places, and exploring the world beyond the plains. They dreamed of simple joys, quiet mornings by the river and evenings under the stars, and each dream felt closer to reality than ever before. Clara began to see the ways in which her waiting had shaped her into the person she had become. She was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had learned patience, resilience, and the value of hope. And now, with Ethan by her side, she felt the full measure of that growth, knowing that their love was deeper and more enduring because of the challenges they had faced separately and together. Ethan, too, had grown. The hardships of the past 5 years had taught him the value of trust, the importance of promises, and the beauty of enduring love. He no longer took life for granted, and he cherished every moment with Clara, knowing how precious their time together truly was. Over the next months, they settled into a shared life, finding comfort in the familiar routines of the town, the river, and the land around them. They built a small home near the fence, planting gardens and creating a space filled with warmth and love. Friends and neighbors often visited, sharing stories, meals, and laughter. The couple became known for their kindness, generosity, and devotion to each other, inspiring those around them with a quiet but powerful example of what true love and patience could achieve. One particular spring morning, Clara stood by the fence, watching the river sparkle in the sunlight. Ethan approached from behind, his hands full of wildflowers he had picked along the path. He handed her a small bouquet, and she laughed, taking it with delight. "These are for you," Ethan said softly. "A reminder that even after years of waiting, life can still be beautiful." Clara smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you. They remind me of everything we've endured and everything we have ahead of us." Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "And I promise we'll face it all together, Clara. No more waiting, no more distance. Just us, side by side, building a life filled with love and joy." As the sun rose higher, bathing the town, river, and fields in warm light, Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The years of longing, hope, and perseverance had brought her to this moment, a moment of truth, love, and shared dreams. The fence, once a symbol of waiting, now stood as a testament to endurance, faith, and the beauty of patience rewarded. Clara and Ethan spent the rest of the day together, walking along the river, laughing, talking, and planning for their future. As they paused at the fence, watching the water flow and the wildflowers sway in the breeze, They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, joys, and unexpected moments. But they also knew that they would face everything together, hand in hand, hearts aligned and spirits intertwined. The sun set that evening in a brilliant display of gold and pink, the river reflecting every hue. Clara and Ethan sat on the fence one last time that day, their hands clasped, their hearts full, and their minds at peace. The long years of waiting had ended, replaced by a life of love, truth, and shared hope. And as the stars began to appear in the sky, Clara whispered softly, "I waited, Ethan, and now I'm home." Ethan smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And I'm here, Clara, I'm finally here." The river flowed, the wildflowers swayed, and the fence stood firm, a silent witness to a love that had endured time, distance, and uncertainty. Together, Clara and Ethan stepped forward into their future, hearts full, spirits united, and the promise of a life built on patience, truth, and unwavering love.